Hello, everyone. I think today it's a great day for us to go through the topic number 2 about customer experience in the virtual banking world. So a bit of the background on this particular session. The last time there was a global crisis, banks were widely perceived to be a big part of the problem. This time around, banks are the central to the solution. Bank can play an immediate role in slowing down the spread of COVID-19 by helping customers make better use of existing digital and remote channel. And banks can help limit the impact of the likely downturn by building new experiences to help their customer manage debt, adjust budget, and make full use of the government programs. In normal times, customer experience in banking is about making customer happy, with the result that they are more loyal, use product more, and cost less to serve. In context of COVID-19, superior customer experience means clarity and transparency, support for digital tools with which many customers are still unfamiliar with new products and services for the customers in distress. Join us in this discussion and we will introduce you to the new digital consumer and how you can use technology and data to provide them with the better customer experience. Join me to welcome our esteemed panelists onto the virtual stage, starting from Mr. Milko Radotic, Vice President for Europe, the Middle East, Africa of Horizon International. The second speaker, Mr. Paulo Realista, Channel Sales Manager of Intel Corporation. Our third panel, Ms. K. Kalpo Luptu, Founder and COO of Hungry Workhorse. And the fourth speaker for today, Ms. Michelle Sheehan, Marketing Director for Asia Pacific and Japan and Greater China of Avaya. We will deep dive into the customer experience in the new virtual banking world. And I would like to circle this with Mr. Milko. How will the new digital bank improve CX for customers across Southeast Asia?
Excellent. Thanks, Izzat. I think it's a really good question that many of us are grappling with. And from my perspective, there's probably two really good things that are happening. One is the digital banks are pushing the frontiers and the boundaries and improving customer experience for their customers. But as a result, they're actually improving their customer experience for the traditional banks' customers as well, because they can't be seen to be left behind. So I think there's probably maybe 3 or 4 key areas that everybody is focusing on and driving. One is that speed and simplicity are really, really critical and important. And the customer experience in all facets of life, whether it's online shopping or it's in banking, is about how do I get something done quickly, efficiently, and be able to move on with what I do. That concept of being able to be self-explanatory or being able to grasp the concept as soon as you see it and be able to complete is one that there's a huge amount of focus on. Although the digital banks are by definition digital, there's still an expectation from the customer that there's channel uniformity, so that the experience that they have when they're on the app or on their online banking environment, or if they pick up the phone and call the support center, that the experience and the ability for their questions to be answered is continuous throughout the whole journey. And probably the last thing that I'll say is that design matters. We have become so quick to make a decision whether we like something or we don't like something. So as soon as you present that customer journey, the look and feel and the experience of it, customers will make a decision whether they want to continue to use it, because their consistency of sticking with a single brand has been diluted over time and people are much more open to explore other options.
Yeah, that is very interesting, because nowadays I think I can resonate really well with you, especially when it comes to uniformity and consistency of the interface. Because now with less human touch, the soft touch of human to human, face to face kind of interaction, I think people just want to have the consistency across when they go to, like what you mentioned, mobile or web-based via their laptop or PCs, right? They need to have that sense of uniformity. And I would like to circle this as well with Ms. Michelle. What is your view on this? Michelle?
It's a really interesting space at the moment, and a lot of people are thinking like digital banking is relatively a new concept, but in fact, studies around digital banking have actually been going on since around about 1998. And already we're seeing the ASEAN banks that have recently gained market share are the ones that have really adopted and heavily invested in digital capabilities. There can be a huge improvement in customer experiences as banks do adopt digital approach, but, and I sort of underline the but, it will only be beneficial if the customer journey is mapped correctly. And that they are all integrated so they can move between these channels, and that history is actually carried through to an agent if something is escalated, and ultimately that is that action or reaction suited to digital. So when you're looking at the customer journey and mapping it, you need to firstly understand the customer and assess their appetite for digital. That could come from data and analytics. But if you're, say, a bank that's got a very aged demographic, you may find that it's going to be harder for them to actually, adopt or adapt to digital. So you really need to understand your customer first. And then once you do actually understand, and then you're mapping the journey, it's not just about those major steps, but you've also got to remember about the micro moments as well, because it will actually have a big impact on the customer experience. And the other key thing I'm going to say is all the channels need to be integrated. So if you start on the website and you go to a bot, you've got history. Each of those touch points is a piece of history. And then for whatever reason you need to be escalated to an agent, that history should be carried through. So when it becomes to an agent, then they actually know they may have already been authenticated. There's no reason to authenticate again because that process has been done. You know what pages they've been on, maybe in the app or the website, the integration, they do actually have the chatbot as well. So that's actually really, really important. And ultimately, you want to make sure that whatever you're doing in the digital space is aligned with your customers' preferences, but it's actually aligned with the outcomes for your bank as well.
Yeah, that is really interesting view. By the way, I think there's two side of things. Initially, when we talk about the uniformity, and then now you speak about the history, the behavior side of things. And I think that is really true because nowadays people are looking to more curated kind of interface, curated, product and services. And I think, like myself from the banking institution, I think generally we see and we observe that people want to have more, bespoke kind of service, bespoke kind of products. So as an example, when it comes to micro lending or revolving credit for that matter, not everyone would want to have a certain bracket or certain much of revolving credit in every month, but rather they want to have as much as they can based on their, their expenses, like what you mentioned just now, expenditure analytics. I think this is something we will deep dive later on, probably, Michelle, in terms of how we can actually improve this customer journey later on. Thank you. Really, really interesting to see both sides of the question from Ms. Milko, Mr. Milko, and also Ms. Michelle. And then let's understand more from Ms. K from Hungry Workhorse on view of millennials and Gen Z, as they will be the new digital bank early adopter, especially when they are born in on-screen world of era. So, Ms. K.
Yeah, thank you, Izzat. It's a very interesting perspective for everyone to appreciate how digital natives are really a growing segment. From a financial institution standpoint, in the work that we do day in and day out, most of these financial institutions, such as banks, for example, actually give a lot of weight on this really growing segment on digital natives pertaining to Gen Z and going all the way to a certain extent to the millennial generation. A lot of it is because, like you said, they have grown or they have been used to utilizing digital technologies and applications in their everyday living. So to the question here as to will they be the first customers, definitely digital banks or traditional banks in the Philippines who are looking to digitize their services will definitely look into this segment as their main customer segment for that matter. And how do they expect the services in this regard. Definitely, there's a lot of connectivity and seamlessness in terms of the customer experience, because especially in this pandemic time, in this new normal, a lot of their transactions and activities actually happen using their phone, right? Whether it's booking a car to get from point A to point B, or from buying from a community seller, right? They utilize all these financial applications to get through all of these activities. And of course, the expectation there really is that their virtual wallets, right, can be connected easily when they need to pay a certain seller that may not be using the same bank, right? The experience here in the Philippines can be quite extreme. Some banks have been mature enough in terms of the digital experience, while others remain to be very traditional, and yet consider going to digital already at this point in time. So, in terms of services, these customer segments, such as your digital natives, the expectation is that the deposit or the fund transfers, for example, are basic services, right? They're looking at areas as to, could I invest in this digital bank so that the bank can then invest my money to certain investment portfolios, all done through online or through the mobile phone. So these are the expectations that we are seeing that they're looking at, and that banks can then look into basing their services as they develop and create new banking services.
That is, I think if we can dovetail it really nicely with Mr. Milko earlier in terms of the CX and everything. So, Ms. K, you mentioned a lot about digital native connectivity. Do you see any integration between, like 5G? You mentioned just now, integration between the merchants and also digital wallets, things like this. It's emerging, right? Yeah.
Yes,
What
definitely.
Is your, yeah, how does, like example, mobile payment and merchant collaborate in the future? How do you see this thing going to emerge later on?
Well, in our line of work, in our consulting practice, of course, it's all about the customer experience. We want to give them the best customer experience as much as possible. But we have to realize also that regulatory plays a huge part in all of these conversations, right? So, the current experience right now is that if you're not banking with Bank A, right, and I'm banking with Bank A, there's a thing called service fee, right? That'll happen in the process, which people really, as much as possible, if we can avoid it, let us avoid it. But this is something that, it's an ongoing conversation with regulatory. Banks have been very, consistent in saying that, they need to charge this, etc. But what we're seeing in the future is that, that's where the seamlessness actually happens, right? It doesn't matter if you're banking with which institution, but we are transacting, and that experience must be seamless. So that's how the future should look like. And regulatory plays a huge part of this, together with the financial institutions, and of course, the users themselves.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I'll probably call it back Milko from the customer experience journey through Southeast Asia. Milko, so just now we speak about all this channel uniformity, and also you mentioned about the look and feel. How do you see in terms of which one the weightage, right, Milko? Which one would be more prominent in terms of the customer side or the business case and the business justification side, especially when it comes to Southeast Asia?
Yeah, look, I think the two are intertwined, and I don't think you can separate one from the other. And I absolutely agree with what Kay was saying, but it's interesting. We work with banks around the world, and one of the things that you're seeing is that digital banks have sort of been able to attract the early adopters on the adoption curve. But in order to sustain the growth, they need to be able to expand beyond just the Gen Zs and the millennials. And they're looking at, how do I push further down the spectrums? So if you look at the complete opposite side, and I'll almost put myself in the same bracket of 55-year-old and aboves, quite often they need a lot more hand-holding and guidance in terms of how do they become comfortable to use this technology. They see their kids, see their grandkids using it, but it's still a scary element of getting on the phone and doing things transactional. So both traditional banks and digital banks are doing a lot to educate all of their customer base potential, so that there's a confidence level and fluency level and a willingness to take on all the digital functionality there.
Yeah, you open up a different facade of the digital banking altogether. And I kind of agree with you in terms of when it comes to digital banking, it's not for the digital native individual demographic, like the Gen Z and all these millennials, but rather we talk about the marginalized community and all these spaces that normally banks don't open up branches at that particular rural area. So with digital banking, I hope that with all these, 5G initiative, connectivities, and all this omni-channel kind of narrative should actually funnel and also bring this together, like what you said, intertwine it together and become a better service and product in the future. But to leverage on your point earlier, right, when we talk about the older generations in terms of adopting this digital customer experience kind of narrative. So what is your view in terms of how bank like myself, right? What kind of initiative should we basically partner up together to make sure the older generation, the people that are actually not familiar with this touch screen kind of narrative, join this bandwagon, if you may?
Look, from my perspective, there's lots of pieces to the puzzle, but it fundamentally boils down to confidence. As a human being, if you're confident to use something, then you're more likely to do so. And in order to build that confidence, it comes down to knowledge and belief and trust.
Yeah.
And this is where, the knowledge piece is based on education, and whether that's digital education to show customers how to download the app, how to register for mobile banking, how to do, balance checks, but then to come to the more scary pieces of transferring money to somebody. That's a really serious step.
Trust, yes.
Okay. But in addition to the educational piece, the trust element is equally important, because there's a trust that's been built up from the branch network where the customers have traditionally walked into and known that if something goes wrong, well, I can always go and see my branch manager. Building that equivalent trust factor in a digital bank is part of the challenge that everybody's trying to focus on as well.
Very insightful. I really resonate really well. Michelle, what about yourself in terms of the demographic you mentioned just now, the target audience, right? We talk about still younger generation, what do you call it, digital savvy people, digital screen generation. What is your view, Michelle?
I have to agree in the sense it does come down to confidence. So, and definitely like an element of trust and how people are going to adopt. So it's definitely got to be a way to encourage people to actually use those digital channels. But what I would say too, I think as technology is more, it's just generally in our lives, we wear watches that monitor our health, tell us what we have to do, things, let us know when a meeting's coming up. So I think just naturally the population of all ages are moving towards like a more sort of self-service type environment. So people that do use those devices are going to be naturally more aligned to the digital channels. Now, when you've got people that don't have devices available to them to take advantage of digital, they're never going to move until they have a device that's available to them, that's got, appropriate internet and connections and things like that to then be able to, take the digital channels. But definitely there's an education element on part of the bank and how they do that. Even walking in, I had to walk into a branch here in Sydney, which I haven't done for years because I was actually taking my mother. And as soon as you get in there now, they take you straight to the screen to say, what can we help you with? And they do actually try and educate the older demographic on you can use a screen. So there is some soft sort of education going on as people are still taking advantage of the traditional. So it's quite interesting to see that transition. But I do believe because it's integrated into our life, I mean, we talk to our devices in our home, and that's starting to be just a natural thing. And also what's quite interesting is before, when we used to speak to devices, it was in keywords, get, yes, no, whereas now you speak to those devices naturally. Hey Siri, bring up a recipe for this. Hey Siri, open up my banking app. You're talking natural language. So it's becoming more embedded in our everyday lives.
Looking forward for just giving instruction, hey Siri, transfer from account A to account B, transfer, I need to pay this and to do that. The NLP will definitely play a major role in this. I just would like to leverage on the same point that you mentioned earlier, right? So as you see, when it comes to, the world itself has shifted and basically transformed significantly basically since COVID-19, where we see retail outlets close down, we see a shop move to online marketplace, and also people try to avoid all these public places, including bank branches. So I think to your point just now, Michelle, right? What is the biggest hurdle to overcome when designing our customer journey, especially when you talk about, we have legacy system and we already have all this technological debt that we already parked in, and then now we are moving to omni-channel where they have the seamless interface or graphical user interface GUI they mentioned, right, across the devices, whether you open it via handphone, whether mobile devices, iPads, or even tablets for that matter.
Yeah, probably the biggest challenges that I have seen in talking to customers and at events when you showcasing capabilities is when you have a digital piece of tech, something that can help you take something digitally, you've got to completely rethink the process. So probably the biggest things that I've seen go wrong is where you've already got a process in place. So you think about the old menu tree where people come in to a bank and they still do it, press 1 for this, press 2 for this, or press 3, whether it's on the dial pad or just by voice. And an organization will decide, you know what, we're going to put in a voice bot there so you can talk to the voice bot, but you don't have to now, they'll say, okay, so the voice bot will say, press 1, press 2, press 3. They're actually using the same aged processes and procedures, where with digital, you have to really rethink, and you've got the opportunity to rethink. And I'll give you an example. A friend of mine booked a little getaway on Airbnb. So they did it all online, used the credit card, and then he actually realized that he had paid with it using his corporate card and not his personal card. So straight away, oh goodness, so went onto the FAQ page and it tells him what to do. And he had a little bit of a challenge. So went straight onto a bot, straight through to an agent, and literally immediately they were able to say, yeah, not a problem. We'll take it off this card and put it onto this card. And it was resolved straight away. But there's some organizations where, you're looking for a refund. Oh, they say, that takes 21 days to process. Now, that's an aged process and it's an aged procedure, because we know payments and that can be processed immediately. So I would say, to me, that's the biggest thing that I've seen where it's gone wrong. And what happens then, the organization, and it's just not banking, but other organizations will look at that digital adoption or implementation, and they go, oh, it's failed. And it's like, well, actually, the technology hasn't failed. It's because you haven't rethought your processes, underneath. And I also to say that, especially when you're first starting out, you want to make sure that those digital channels that you're introducing, you start with sort of those common and easily to deliver, bank balances, checking on maybe an application, a process, even authentication. So those things that are common that can be answered easily. And as the organization and as the piece of technology learns, then you can start to expand, capabilities. And each of those steps really need to be aligned with your customer and with the process that they go through, because we know customers change all the time. And they're a bit more savvy. So they actually get from point A to point B a lot quicker. So we've really got to understand each one of those and make sure each of those things have been mapped as part of the journey. So yeah, that's basically the way that I see it at the moment.
Yeah, that is really interesting, because I think you point out one of the key challenges, I think, across all these industries, whether it's banking or anything when it comes to customer experience and digital transformation, where sometimes organizations, they don't really see the process end to end. So when they try to automate it, there's a lot of gaps and area of improvement they need to do in the manual process first before they can embed all this robotic process automation or all these automated tools and devices. I would like to invite Mr. Paulo from Intel Corporation to join our conversation, especially when it comes to your experience in the omni-channel adoption. So in your view, right, Paulo, what is the biggest hurdle to overcome when designing customer journey to adopt digital first ecosystem like what we mentioned earlier?
Yeah, that's a good question, Isaac. Now, when we talk about digitalization, we always consider legacy or obsolete hardware and software systems as the major roadblocks. and not to forget about all the security policies and regulations that we need to comply. But actually it can work. New technology can work on top of traditional systems to make it more advanced. Like say, for example, we can place smart cameras on ATMs to bio-authenticate the person, or we can convert traditional ATMs to touchless with gesture recognition. So, with this, perhaps, in my opinion, the major roadblock is actually mindset. So traditional mindsets have hampered evolution, as evolving operational understandings outpaced by the rapid transformation in customer expectations. So from a business standpoint, it is important to understand the value of modernization. Legacy systems actually create data silos that work for so long. We need to understand the process of modernization, like what Michelle said, how to measure its impact. And, in my option setting, the goal of modernization is very important to create value, because a lot of digital transformations are deployed due to its nice to have for a certain feature, but not really solving the pain points, like setting right goal to increase customer satisfaction, or to improve marketing campaign engagements.
Yeah, I think that is very, very true in terms of the mindset itself, right? In terms of the modernization, the mindset transformation is really important. So just now we were talking about trust, right? So what is your view in terms of building this trust capability, especially when it comes to finance institution or banking services? Because, at the end of the day, if you can't see people in front of you, you're talking to a robot or a kiosk or a chatbot, right? You don't have that human trust. So how do you embed and build that narrative, especially when it comes to this mind shift, paradigm shift of having this trust interacting with robot?
Yeah, when we are introducing new technology, especially here in the Philippines, they're always keen to use cases. When we have new technology, we always have examples from other countries, showing that these are actually working and it's very effective. And then they do POCs or proof of concepts, and then from there, we just deploy those solutions to them.
I see. Yeah, I think that because even for our side, we actually operate a branchless virtual bank in Philippines. So I know Philippines is quite blooming in that area and space. I would like just to bring back Kay to the conversation, especially when it comes to millennials and Gen Z, right? We talk about customer first kind of narrative. What kind of mindset would you build, Kay, if you may, especially in the hungry workhorse organization?
Right. Yes, I also use CIMB, is that. So, I've been playing around with that app. Yes. So, so to your question, so we do a lot of customer journey mapping, engagements, right? And, that exercise actually goes through the tiny, all through the nitty gritty details of a customer's experience with all of these touch points, right? That's really where the devil lies in the details, right? So you need to take a step back and then really understand from the mindset of the millennial or the digital native or even a baby boomer, for that matter. How is their experience happening as you go through touch points A to Z, for example, right? Now, you spoke of trust earlier, and our perspective is that trust really is, while it's a behavioral thing, it's also a generational thing, right? Of course, the younger people are easier to trust all these chatbots, and the narrative is somewhat easier. But as we go through the chain of these generations, right? Baby boomers, for example. I mean, you just cannot have them speak to a chatbot for the entirety of their issue or concern, right? And the same thing goes in as far as creating new services for them. A baby boomer may be interested in insurance services. In the Philippines, for example, sachet marketing is very popular. A lot of digital banks actually offer financial services sachet, like prepaid, something like that. So that works. So again, to your point, it's really curating all these experiences and understanding really how we go through those touch points, those very important touch points. Again, it's personalization.
Yeah, I think there's one point, the baby boomer, especially the older generation. I think one of the point that I would like just to highlight, especially when it comes to digital transformation, all this cloud adoption, all this artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? There is one part where, previously when it comes to banks like our size, we have segmentized customer based on their net worth, or even their CASA account, their current and saving accounts, right? So now when it comes to all this chatbot integration with artificial intelligence, we talked about NLP earlier, natural language processing capabilities in the bot itself. It's no longer talking about one, press two, press three, but rather it's open-ended kind of question. So bank like our size, we wanted to have, we want to basically provide similar experience throughout, whether you are the high net worth individuals or you're normal or anything, right? So when it comes to relationship manager, as you know, that we always focus in CMB, like yourself, a customer, we have preferred customer that we attend to. But now we're trying to actually reach out to other people having the similar experience of some sort like a virtual relationship manager. They can advise in terms of what kind of portfolio you should invest in, what kind of saving that they should focus on, what kind of product they can leverage. So when it comes to things like this, right, how far to you, right? How far can this particular automation to the customer journey, this customer journey can go? Okay.
Yeah. So there's only, we always say there's only one way to find out, right? We have to try. I mean, we have to try and promote these services. Many of these customers are like myself. I belong to the Gen X generation. I play around with these services. CIMB, for example, I've gone through some level of detail. I've explored the services. I'm not looking at deposits or whatnot, but for example, like investments, for example, and they've done some work with Gcash, for example, and there's that technicality. There's a technicality behind those two institutions that may not be as easily visible to the customer. But my point is, as financial institutions or those who are tapping the industry in as far as creating new services to the customer for a better customer experience, the point really is that we must continue to create new services based on the needs of these customers. And the only way to know the needs of these customers is to truly understand their experience.
Yeah.
And by understanding that experience, you have to go through the digital touch point or whatever touch points that you have.
Yeah, agree. All right. What about Milko, in terms of the Southeast Asia? How far customer journey can go in terms of this automation narrative, Milko?
Look, I think the customization piece is critical because the more you can customize both the customer experience and the customer journey, the happier the customer will be and the more likely they are to spend longer. And that's one of the key elements that the banks are trying to do, right? How do I get to not just come to their banking app once a week to check the balance or to pay a bill, but how do I get them to, as you mentioned just earlier, educate themselves, do financial planning, learn more about the products, get deeper engagement with all of the features, functions, capabilities that we've spent huge amounts of money as a banks investing in, launch, but then go, whoa, adoption is actually the key here. So how do I get adoption from the customers to use it? And I'll just mention one more thing to pick up on what Paulo said before, that there absolutely has been a significant push on this side, and COVID has had a devastating effect on the world over the last year. But if there is a positive side from a banking perspective, what it has done is it's caused the banking executives to realize that not everything has to take 2 or 3 years to get implemented. They were able to, because of the crisis, focus on execution, set up home-based contact centers where people, no longer were able to go into the office and still be able to provide that service, and completely transform the telephony network or the chatbot services. And one of the challenges that they have now is that, okay, we are hopefully coming towards the end of the physical separation piece. How do we get all of these customers that were pushed to become digital and they became digital? How do we get them to stay digital so that they don't slowly erode back into their old behavior? And that's one that is a key focus for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, I think the chatbot part, I think like I can't agree more. Happy customer, happy shareholders. I think let's deep dive a bit in terms of the chatbot side. How much automation can this actually help us? Michelle, to you, what do you think? What's in the pipeline? What is in the R&D side of things? Tell us a little bit about chatbot.
I think, I mean, look, any piece of technology can go as far as what you want to do. You know, at the end of the day, when you've got technology, it's about programming that piece of technology to deliver what you want. You know, it really comes down to the bank about how far they want to take technology. And I think it's really important, though, to remember still the value that an agent can play in that customer journey. And you know, when we're looking at adopting technology in our customer base, we always, as I mentioned before, we always look for what are some of those common things that people ask all the time that are reasonably simple that we can then automate. But then where does the bank really actually want to have an agent? Because there's opportunities maybe for upsell, cross-sell, and also too when things get escalated. Through knowing your data, knowing the customer journey, looking at analytics, you know, it's nearly like you can use your technology actually to give you a best match. So whilst you may start on chat or voice bot, if you do have to get escalated, you've got to use the power of your data, so your analytics, to actually make sure that if someone has to come in to a voice channel and actually talk live to an agent, they're actually matched with the best agent, because then you're delivering on the promise that you're still providing a great, you know, customer experience. And you can do that with your analytics. And I think that's playing a bigger role. Like technology is there, definitely. You know, chatbots and AI and all those sorts of things are there and have been for a while. I still say it comes down to then how you utilize those to best suit the customer experience. But, you know, don't forget about your employee experience and your agents and how you integrate them into that.
I think to your point, I think the most significant thing in terms of enabling all this automation is data. So basically without this proper, you know, data analytics and everything, you can't actually enable this kind of capability. And especially, I think spot on just now, the more data we have, because now people are saying data is a new currency. With more data, the more fine-tuned that we can build, the more, you know, the better the robot will be eventually. And how about from Intel Corporation, let's hear from Paulo, what he thinks about all these chatbot automations in terms of all these processes. Paulo?
Sorry, Zat, I didn't catch your question. Can you repeat that?
So we were talking about the rise of chatbot, and Michelle was telling about data is the one actually funneled in with all this narrative and also getting the better, you know, outcome for the chat itself and automated systems. So what is your view in terms of how far, like I said, how far the automation can go with this transformation customer journey kind of narrative?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Michelle mentioned and what you mentioned about data as the new currency. Actually, data is everywhere. You know, it's really a matter of how we use the data that we get.
Yeah.
So if you're asking how far we can go, actually we can go very far with it. You know, we can automate basically almost every process that we can do. You know, it's just really a matter of time.
Yeah, true. I think I agree with you. Data is literally everywhere. So I think before we conclude the session, right, I would just like to ask for one word from everyone in terms of the future banking world. What would be the one word for you, from you, Paulo?
Adaptive.
Adaptive. Very good. Good choice. Michelle, how about yourself?
Alignment.
Wow, nice. Milko?
I'll go with inclusive.
Inclusive. Yep.
I like that. Yeah, I like that inclusive. I will go for flexible.
Flexible. All right. I think we have a very dynamic people in this forum. I resonate really well with all of the point. With that, I think it marks our end of our panel session for today. Thank you everyone for participating, and I thank to all these panelists for really insightful conversation. And I hope that we can take few points and bring it back to our organization and be part of this digital virtual banking movement for all the organization. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.